People's Republic of Amnesia, Tiananmen Revisited by Louisa Lim is a thought-provoking and deeply investigative book that examines one of the most significant yet under-discussed events in modern Chinese history, the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. This work delves into how the Chinese Communist Party (CCP) has systematically erased the memory of the protests and the brutal crackdown that followed, reshaping the narrative to ensure political control and stability. Lim blends personal stories, interviews, and historical analysis to uncover the truth about what happened and how it has shaped China's collective memory, or lack thereof. Historical context and the event. In 1989, China experienced a wave of pro-democracy protests, primarily led by students, intellectuals, and workers who gathered in Tiananmen Square in Beijing. They demanded political reform like freedom of speech and an end to corruption within the CCP. The protests gained momentum over several weeks, culminating in a massive demonstration involving hundreds of thousands of people. However, the government responded with extreme measures, sending military forces to suppress the movement. On June 3 to 4, 1989, the People's Liberation Army (PLA) moved into the square, using tanks and live ammunition against unarmed civilians. Estimates of the death toll vary, but thousands are believed to have been killed or injured. Lim's book provides a comprehensive exploration of this tragic event, focusing not only on the protests and their aftermath, but also on how the Chinese government has worked to erase this episode from public consciousness. The erasure of memory. One of the central themes of Lim's book is the concept of amnesia, a term she uses to describe the deliberate effort by the CCP to suppress public memory of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Through censorship, propaganda, and intimidation, the government has created a society where many young people are entirely unaware of what happened in 1989. Lim describes how textbooks omit references to the massacre, internet searches related to Tiananmen are heavily censored, and public discussions about the event are forbidden. Lim's interviews with young Chinese citizens reveal the extent of this collective amnesia. Many interviewees express surprise or confusion when confronted with information about the massacre, having grown up in an environment where such topics are taboo. This lack of knowledge is not accidental, but a result of a carefully orchestrated campaign by the CCP to maintain its authority by erasing dissent from historical records. Had personal stories and testimonies. What makes the People's Republic of Amnesia particularly compelling is Lim's use of personal stories to humanize the tragedy. She interviews a range of individuals, including survivors of the massacre, family members of victims, former officials, and even soldiers who participated in the crackdown. These testimonies provide a multifaceted perspective on the events of 1989 and their lasting impact. One particularly poignant story is that of Zhang Shanling, a mother who lost her son during the massacre. Zhang became a founding member of the Tiananmen Mothers, a group of bereaved parents who have tirelessly sought justice and accountability for the deaths of their loved ones. Despite facing constant surveillance, harassment, and threats from the government, Zhang and other members of the group continue to demand recognition of the massacre and its victims. Lim also interviews a former soldier who describes the psychological toll of being ordered to fire on unarmed civilians. His account underscores the moral dilemmas faced by individuals caught in the machinery of state violence. These personal narratives not only highlight the human cost of the Tiananmen Square massacre, but also expose the lengths to which the CCP will go to silence dissent. The role of propaganda. Lim examines how the CCP has used propaganda to rewrite the history of Tiananmen Square. In the immediate aftermath of the massacre, the government launched a massive propaganda campaign to justify its actions, portraying the protesters as violent counter-revolutionaries who threatened national stability. This narrative has since been institutionalized, with official accounts framing the events of 1989 as necessary to ensure China's economic development and social harmony. The book also explores how the CCP has manipulated national pride to discourage critical inquiry into the massacre. By promoting a narrative of China's economic success as a justification for political repression, the government has fostered a sense of collective amnesia among the population. This tactic has been particularly effective among younger generations, who have grown up in an era of rapid economic growth and are more focused on personal advancement than on political activism. The international dimension Lim's book also considers the international response to the Tiananmen Square massacre and its aftermath. Initially, the crackdown drew widespread condemnation from Western governments, with many imposing sanctions on China. However, over time, economic interests have taken precedence over human rights concerns, leading to a normalization of relations with the Chinese government. Lim criticizes this pragmatic approach, arguing that it has allowed the CCP to avoid accountability for its actions in 1989. The book highlights the complicity of foreign companies and governments in perpetuating the CCP's narrative. For example, Lim discusses how Western technology companies have assisted in building China's extensive censorship apparatus, enabling the government to control information and suppress dissent. This complicity raises important ethical questions about the role of the international community in upholding human rights and historical truth. The persistence of dissent. Despite the CCP's efforts to erase the memory of Tiananmen, Lim documents instances of resistance and dissent that continue to challenge the government's narrative. The Tiananmen mothers, as well as activists and dissidents both inside and outside China, have kept the memory of the massacre alive. Lim highlights the work of individuals like artist Ai Weiwei, whose provocative installations and public statements have drawn attention to issues of censorship and state violence. The book also explores how technology has created new opportunities for preserving and disseminating information about Tiananmen. While the Chinese government has invested heavily in internet censorship, activists have found creative ways to circumvent these controls, using social media, encrypted messaging apps, and virtual private networks, VPNs, to share banned content. Lim argues that these acts of resistance, though small in scale, are significant in their defiance of state-imposed amnesia. Broader implications. The People's Republic of Amnesia is not just a book about Tiananmen Square. It is also a broader critique of authoritarianism and its impact on society. Lim argues that the suppression of memory and dissent is not unique to China.